What's up? How you doing? Here we are, Wednesday. Already Wednesday. 4th of July yesterday, and kind of made the week go by quick. Last night, fireworks, crazy out here. Everybody in my neighborhood, including old people, were outside lighting fireworks. Everybody. And here, you could buy fireworks legally. I don't think you could light them off legally, though. But yeah, it was, mostly explosives. I didn't see that many go up there. I mean, there were a few, but mostly it was, firecrackers, things like that. Cherry bombs, I heard, a bunch. So anyway, we'll get back to that in a minute. Tonight, nice out. Very pleasant. So we're gonna have a little beer tonight, an unusual one. This is the old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout. Show you the guy right there. So I had it in the fridge, nice and cold, right there. And we're gonna try and see what this is like. Remember, drink responsibly. Do not drink and drive. Never get in your car drunk. If you're drunk and you drove to some place before you got drunk, leave your car, take Uber. Even if they tow your car the next day, so what? Pay the tow. Better than losing your life or killing someone else. Anyway, always drink responsibly, especially when you go out. Now when you're home, you could have a couple extra because you're home. But even then, you want to be able to find your room at night. So, first thing I notice, looks like Coca-Cola. Very dark. Very rich. So, I think it says independent since 1988. Apparently there was a war, it was fought, and they gained their independence. I don't know who this guy is. Maybe this is the old Rasputin. Yeah, that's who that is. Says that this guy here, Rasputin, I don't want to say Putin. A lot of Republicans, on the radio, either they say nuclear. If you're a Republican, a lot of Republicans, they say nuclear. A lot of Republicans, they say Putin. The hardcore ones, they say Putin. Anyway, this one says that this guy was poisoned. He was fed poisoned wine and tea cakes by his rivals. So I guess he survived. Surviving that, he was shot several times, whereas upon he attacked his assailants, he finally succumbed when bound and stuffed through a hole in the ice to drown in the river Neva. So, Rasputin is probably best remembered for his dramatic exit. Having been deemed politically expendable. So anyway, when I hear that word expendable, I think of Sylvester Stallone, not because of the Expendables. That's now. Where did that come from? Rambo 2. Remember he's in that boat with that I guess she's supposed to be Vietnamese, but I don't think in real life she was. But yeah, that hot lady he's with. And she asks him a question, and he says to her, that he's expendable. That's why they chose him. Expendable. But he likes that word. I think he came up with that title, or somebody that knew him said, "Hey, can we use that word you always use?" No, not absolutely. Expendable. He likes expendable. Anyway, cheers. Rich. Good beer. It's good beer. It's rich, bitter. I don't mind bitter. I don't mind the bitter end. That's what life is. So, regular beer has about 5% alcohol. 5%. Not that much, unless you sit there drinking like a horse, right? This one here has 9%. So this is almost double. Beer for my horses. Love that song. Willie Nelson and Toby Keith. Hope Toby Keith makes a 100% recovery. I'm a big fan of Toby Keith. Whiskey for my men and beer for my horses. Went to see Willie Nelson one time, many years ago, 2005. I have it nice and cold, so I went to see him, and we're pretty close to the stage, standing up, and right in front of me, like 3 feet in front of me, were these young girls. They must have been, 24 and down, maybe 24 to 21, around there, young. And I was amazed. They knew every single lyric, every single word to a Willie Nelson song. He was singing, they were singing right along, and they were singing. And back then, I hadn't heard the song "Beer for My Horses." Hadn't heard it, and so he sang it, and they were singing along. And I got, that's a cool song, and they knew every word. And then I went out and I researched, did a little investigation, and I found out that that's a Toby Keith duet on the Toby Keith album. And I went and bought it, and I immediately became a big fan of Toby Keith. Love all his songs. Red Solo Cup. Love that song. But yeah, he's got a lot of songs. Been listening to Toby Keith for close to 20 years. Right around 2005, I got my first Toby Keith CD. Got the radio here, shortwave capabilities. We'll listen to it after. Get Hawaii, Japan on a nice night, clear night. Bounce it off the, I think it's a Stratosphere or something like that. Always been a fan of the radio, especially the old days when each town had its own group of DJs and they were good. Now, DJs okay, but talk shows, they got one guy, they syndicate him all over the country. So anywhere you go, it's the same guy. It's like 5 guys now dominate the airwaves on talk. In the old days, you drove, 50 miles over, and there was another guy and another guy over there, another guy on the radio, and you had all these different points of view and all these different styles, not just politics. It was some of them, I used to listen to a guy named Norm Nathan. Loved listening to Norm Nathan late at night, and it was light subjects. Open lines. It was all light stuff. He always wanted to keep it light, which I liked. You get sick and tired of, the fussing and fighting all the time, politics and all that. I want to hear some light stuff. So I would listen to Norm Nathan, and I used to love that show. People call in late at night. I think he was on 10 to 2. And people would say, today this happened. It was all light subjects. So tonight, chicken. One time my father was explaining to me that he said he didn't know what it was, but one time he was, I don't know where he was, but somebody gave him a German beer. He thinks it was German. It could have been, I don't know, could have been Polish. But he said it was one of the best beers he ever had. And he described it to me. He said it was black in color, very good flavor and all that. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was this. Probably not. I don't think it was Guinness. My father, if he had a Guinness, he wouldn't know what that, he'd be like, what is that? Is that beer? I don't know what that is. I like Guinness. I have it once in a while, once in a blue moon. I'm not a booze bag, I'll have a little bit with my meal, but I won't go, I'll have one. I won't go like, some guys, they sit there, they empty up, a couple 6-packs. I don't do that. I remember one time I used to watch Alice, love that show, with Mel's Diner, and he would always talk about going home and having a 6-pack. I don't know. Seems like a lot. I know people out there, they have, 10 beers, no problem. But, I want to find my room at night, go to bed, wake up the next day, not feeling like, radiation poisoning. Moderation. All right, so what was I going to mention before? Fireworks. Yeah. So the story, probably mentioned this before. The story with me is that I always wanted, firecrackers especially. I was fascinated. Turn down the bass. And there were kids in my school that they would sell you these things. Back then the going price was 25 cents a pack, which wasn't that much. So I would go and I remember this kid, he'd say, meet me here. I'd meet him after school and I'd say, give me 10 packs. Give him $2.50. I'd go home in the backyard and I'd light them. Bang, bang, bang. And a few times, I would hold it too long and my index finger would suffer. So there was a place in the north part, not the north, but the north side there. It wasn't really the north side, but anyway, that's where they would go, these kids. But nobody would tell you where it was specifically. It was all underground stuff. And you'd ask, and they'd go, I don't know what that is. I don't know, I don't know. They always pretended they didn't know, were playing dumb. But one time, somebody told me where it was, and literally I was down there from April to July 3rd, probably a couple times a week. Wouldn't buy a lot. I'd buy like, $4 worth of gross of bottle rockets. I would go down there and say, give me a gross of bottle rockets. Guy would have a little notepad. He'd write it out. He'd give it to the runner. And this was an alley. Go in an alley, and there was on the right-hand side, there was a basketball court area. A bunch of, basketball hoops. And he'd give it to the runner. The older guy who looked like he was in his late 30s, he would wait around and the runner would take off. And he'd go to some house where they had these things stored, and he'd bring me back something that looked like Chinese food to go. And I'd leave, and I'd go home and light them off. I was fascinated. I used to buy jumping jacks. And I remember one time I was over at my grandfather's house, my grandparents. My mother was visiting them with one of her friends. And I was downstairs with her son. Her son was a few years younger than me. And we were down there and I was lighting them off, pack at a time. I had a ton. I had like maybe 5 or 6 kegs. And I was just lighting them off. As fast as I could get them in my hand, I would light them off, pack at a time. And I knew that diagonally across my grandparents' home was an old guy who, at a drop of a hat, or even a dime, he would call the cops. And I saw him a couple times. I looked over and he lived in a brown house. He had the what do you call it, the shade or the curtain. Pull it over, he was looking, and then he'd close it. I guess I got on his nerves and he called the police. So I had my back to the street and there was a gate, so they couldn't come in. So I had my back to them and I was just lighting them off. And then in my head I had this image, after watching the old man watch me, I had an image of the police were right there. And as it happened to be, I turn around and there's a cruiser and there's two cops in there, and they go, hand them over. They did one of those to me, and they were all, I had them all there. I should have kept one out and then the rest of them somewhere else, but I had them all out, and they saw them, and they took them, gave them to their kids. So I was kind of pissed off. But then I went back and I bought more. Yeah, so it all started. My father, he was at this place, and right next to that place was a joke shop. The windows were all, they had these windows that had brown paper on them, so you couldn't see inside. What's in there? So I went in there. It was a joke shop. Some chubby guy owned it. Guy looked like the guy, Mr. Gatso from Rocky 1 and 2. So he was in there, the owner. And I bought a couple of funny things, stink bombs and things like that, got them from him. And then, I don't know, the conversation, I was talking to him, and I said, I wish I knew a place where I could buy fireworks, firecrackers. And he goes, yeah. So about an hour later, I go back in, and he was there, and he goes, hey, let me talk to you for a minute. And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, you looking for firecrackers? I go, yeah. He goes, I have some firecrackers I could sell you. I said, oh, my eyes got all big, looked like an alien from outer space. And I go, what? He goes, firecrackers, $8 a keg. I go, wow, $8, that's cheap. That's 10 cents a pack. There's 80 packs. I was paying 25 cents. So I go over to my father, who wasn't in there. I had to, run across and talk to him. I thought he was going to say, yeah, all right. So I say, hey, a guy over there selling firecrackers, $8 for a keg. And my father says, what do you want that? You're going to hurt yourself. Reminded me of that scene in that thing, that kid wanted a BB gun, and everybody was telling him he was going to shoot his eye out. So I was disappointed. He wasn't giving me the $8 to get that thing. I was really disappointed. I really wanted it. I mean, I could taste it. So I came with a plan. The plan was that I was going to go to bed that night, and then I was going to do some in my sleep talking. And I was going to say, I want the firecrackers. And I was going to be loud about it, about the firecrackers. And my father, who was down the hall, the plan was he would hear it and then think to himself, he really wants that. I think I'll get it for him. So I get up at 2 o'clock. I was ready to, do this whole acting bit where, I was like craving the firecrackers in my dreams, and I was all loud about it. And then it hit me how ridiculous that was. So I didn't do it. And I didn't get the firecrackers either. But the following year, when I found out, I didn't ask anybody. I just kept going. I would get on the train, and I would head down there. And then on the train, it was me with Chinese food to go bag, because that's what they made it look like. It made it look like you were getting Chinese food. And then I would go home and, light them up. Then one time I got those big rockets, and I went to the railroad tracks with a friend of mine, and we lit them. We lit one at an angle. We put it on the railroad tracks. It was kind of like in a 45-degree angle, and that thing went over the street and landed on top of a building. Well, it blew up before it landed, so all the ammunition and all the the material that could cause a fire was gone. Luckily. But they're very dangerous. Now, as an old person, I'm very cautious of things like that. I see it in a different way. I don't find it that fascinating anymore. I mean, I still light them off once in a while. Like, I haven't done it in years, but when I was in Nevada, I had bought some. They have these stores there. They're massive. You go inside, it's like a warehouse for Lowe's or something. And I bought a bunch of things, and then I went out into the desert where there's nothing to burn. It's just rocks. And I lit a bunch of stuff. Lit some rockets there, lit some firecrackers, some fancy things that made colors. And, there's still a little kid inside somewhere. But, I was a big fan of that stuff. But I realized very dangerous. I said, these two fingers have suffered, a few times. It's like boom. You know, you think you have enough time. You're like, oh, a little bit longer. Like, for what reason? Just throw it. You know, and then your finger would get all like red, and there'd be like a red blood spot. What's going on there? I hear noise. I don't know what that is. Anyway, I'm gonna do the chicken before I get asked where's the food. So I'm gonna, you know, salt, pepper, oregano, nothing fancy. Anyway, that's it. Ciao.